friends, welcome back to Hello Friends, the Mr. Robot review show. Welcome to Project Potter, guys. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to episode 38, episode 7 of season 4 of Mr. Robot. Boy, guys, there was a lot going on in this one. I'm going to do my best to recap it, try and give it justice, but man, there was a whole bunch of things happening. So if you haven't seen the show before, guys, this is a review of every episode of Mr. Robot here. We are doing a recap of the episode. We are doing a score out of 10 and a White Rose Award, which is our favorite actor or actress. So yeah, we're going to kick it off here, guys. We only have 6 more left after this. So we're getting towards the end of Mr. Robot, sadly. But if you remember last episode, guys, Elliot got a call from Krista, and he went to go meet her, and he got jumped by Vera's people, thrown in the trunk, and that's immediately where we pick up. So we open up the episode where it's like the inside of the trunk there, and it's like very like dimly lit, like you can barely see like the blue inside, but you hear all these cars going by and all this stuff. And so it's really, really literally where we left off last time. So they open the trunk. And Peanuts opens the trunk, the kid in the red coat, and he kind of grabs Elliot out there, and then we cut back to black. We get some more producers, written and directed by Sam Esmail, and then we get not the Mr. Robot title card, but we do get the same font there, and we get Act 1. And this is a 5-act episode, and every act is just absolutely magnificent. Almost all of the episode, if not all of the episode, is shot in with the black frames on the tops there. So it's written like a play. It feels like a play. It's got the different acts. The music is specifically like a play. It's really great. There's these awesome slow zoom ins and zoom outs that I don't think Mr. Robot's really done before. It's all an absolute masterpiece, guys. So we begin with Vera, and he's still got his yellow jumpsuit, and he's like, I don't want to fanboy out some of this shit, but he's like, I've been waiting a long time for this. And he's sitting across from Elliot there, and he's got the gag on, and he turns around and he's like, what's the word that therapist used? He's like, and they're like, verklempt. And he's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little verklempt and shit. And yeah, Vera's awesome. We slowly pan out. There's a side shot. It's Elliot at the table, Vera there, Peanuts in the background. But again, the sun is coming in. This is all in Chris's apartment again. But Vera tells him to like Javi to make Elliot a little more comfortable. So Javi goes over and he pulls the gag back and like snaps Elliot's neck back before he undoes it. So just a little kind of a dick move there, but. Elliot then, once he's got the gag off, Mr. Robot comes up and he's like, all right, he's like, we got to think of an escape plan. And Elliot's like, escape plan? He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, there's no chance of escape. And he's like, this is the only thing we got to do, man. Mr. Robot's like, we got the Mexican El Chapo over here, or whatever he says. He's like this Dominican meth head or whatever. He's like, and Vera's just smoking from like a bowl the whole episode basically. So he's just getting more and more fucked up. And Peanuts says something to him and to Elliot, and Vera's like, I swear to God, you better shut the fuck up. And it's funny because Vera is very much like, this is my stage here, and his henchmen are there, but he's kind of like, he's controlling the whole stage. So there's this back and forth there where Vera's telling him how he goes on this long story about how he, went to this island, and he's like, growing up, I wanted to own the island. He's like, the island that these people like slept on and walked on. He's like, I wanted to own every inch of that shit. And so he talks about, how he went to see a shaman, and the shaman told him, he's got to drink this juice. And he's like, I just gulped it down. And he's like, I'm going to be honest with you, bro. He's like, I was shitting and I was puking. And he's like, and I kept doing it. And it's funny because Vera is very much like just talking to him. He's like, okay, brah. And Elliot VR is so good in this episode. And Vera is like, he's got the knife, and he's like, oh, I forgot this was Isaac's knife. He's like, my brother. He's like, you might remember him. So Vera goes on this whole story about how he's like, I realized that home isn't where you're from. It's where you're supposed to be. And he's like, I was born in the Dominican, but he's like, I came to New York. He's like, this is where I thrived. This is home. So Vera eventually talks about how, he got his own island eventually. And he's like, on the 87th day, I got my own island on. He's like, on the 88th day, I was bored. And he's like, that's why I came back. He's like, I owned the wrong island. And he's like, you're going to work with me, Elliot. And he's like, we're going to take over New York together. Elliot's like, you're not going to work with me. He's like, but if you do want to work with me, he's like, I need to make sure that Krista is safe. And he's like, why do you care so much about Krista? And he's like, that's the only leverage you have over me, isn't it? And he's like, oh, I see how it is. He's like, well, show me that Krista is safe. He's like, and then we'll consider your plan. And Elliot's like, I need to see her before we go anywhere. And he's like, that's all you want, huh? He's like, a little meet and greet. He's like, okay, we're going to do that. He's like, and then we're going to get it down to brass tacks. And that's how Act 1 ends. So we cut to Act 2. And again, the music is like crescendoing in every time. It's really great. And they go into the other room because we got this aerial shot where it's Krista's apartment, and it's Elliot and Vera, and then Mr. Robot, who's like, this is gonna be a long one. I'm sitting on the couch, and then his henchman, and then behind the room behind them is where Krista is. And so they actually go to see Krista. Vera's telling him like that he wants to talk to Mr. Robot, and Elliot's like, no, you can talk to me. And he's like, okay then. And he's like, I know how to get you to talk. And he goes over to Krista. And he starts talking to Krista, and he's like, hey, how's she doing? He's like, maybe I'm just the wrong one asking the questions. And he starts putting his hand like up her skirt, and Elliot's like, don't you fucking touch her. And he's like, I'm not touching her. He's like, I'm just taking her temperature. And he's clearly like instigating Elliot. And then we get this great scene where it's like this flash, I think it's like lightning, or just the music comes in. And then Mr. Robot shows up, and he's like, what do you want to talk about? He's like, how do I know it's, Verga's like, how do I know it's you? He's like, I didn't see no puff of smoke. And Mr. Robot, he's like standing against the bookshelf, and he comes over and he's like, listen up. He's like, first off, fuckface. He's like, let's make one thing clear. He's like, I'm not no puff of smoke. Okay. And he's talking about, he's like, I need you to tell me your master plan right now before we go any farther. Nuts gets up in his face, and he points a gun at him, and he's like, listen, I don't care who the fuck you are. He's like, you're not so tough now, are you? Or he's like, where's your fucking courage now? And he holds a gun to him. And Mr. Robot just turns at him. He looks right at the gun, and he says, right fucking here. So Vera says, let's make sure we keep this friendly. Peanuts eventually puts the gun down there, and he's like, what kind of name is Mr. Robot anyway? He's like, that's some Nickelodeon bullshit. And he goes over to sit on the window. And so Vera's talking to Mr. Robot, and he's like, man, I want to own every inch of this city. He's like, I want my shit going at drug dealers. He's like, I want it to go in stores and trains and buses. He's like, every single place. He's like, built all the billboards. He's like, I want to own every block of the city. And Mr. Robot tells him, like, he's like, that's it. He's like, so you want to get into real estate? He's like, please tell me that you didn't drag me here for this bullshit. When he's like, he could have just taken a couple of Brooklyn classes on Brooklyn real estate. And he's like, first of all, he's like, you don't have the money for that kind of adventure. And Vera's like, I got some startup. And he's like, it's not going to get you anywhere, dude. And so Vera goes, how much money then? And Mr. Robot is like, if you're asking the question, he's like, you already have no idea. He's like, you want to get your name out there? He's like, Photoshop and put it on a billboard. But he's like, you don't have the kind of money for anything here. And so they get like in each other's face there. And Mr. Robot is not backing down from Vera, and he gets up in his face, and he's just shooting down like every idea that Vera has. There's so many great lines, and I wish that I could like recite them line for line, but I honestly don't remember all of them. But he like sits on the couch, and he gets up, and the henchmen are sitting back there, but Vera's like not getting to the point that he needs to get to. So once Vera finds out that he realizes he doesn't have enough money, Mr. Robot is like, you know what? He's like, I do have a plan. He's like, we have a plan going on tonight. He's like, I'm going to steal more money than you can ever dream of. And he's like, I can give that to you. If you let Krista go, he's like, it's all yours. And he's like, why would you just get rid of all that dough? And he's like, I don't give a shit about money. He's like, I just want to take it from them who like were stealing it from everyone else. So Vera's like, all right, that sounds nice. But he's like, Krista doesn't even trust you. He's like, I read her notes. He's like, so if she doesn't trust you, he's like, why should I? And then we cut back to Elliot, and Elliot says, I'll show you. And suddenly they look over, and the music comes in again. And even Mr. Robot looks over. And Elliot's like, I'll show you the whole plan. He's like, you want to see numbers? He's like, I got bank accounts. I got statements. He's like, I'll show you exactly how much money we're going to be getting. He's like, it's all good. He's like, but you need to let Krista go. So we cut over to Act 3, guys. They go back in the other room. They get Elliot's bag, and he pulls up his laptop, and he shows them, all the money, and he goes, wow, that's a lot of zeros. He's like, come over and look at this shit. Peanuts is like, wow. He's like, that's stadium money. And then Javier's like, what the fuck is stadium money? And Elliot's like thinking about grabbing the gun in his bag there. And he like loses his shot, and then he goes and grabs it at the last second when they're all hovering over the laptop. And they give him like a look where they're all like laughing about the money. And then they look at him, and Vera's like, bro, you don't want to do this. And Elliot then points it at Peanuts, and he pulls the trigger, but all the bullets are gone. They start cracking up, and he's like, you really think we didn't check your bag when you came in? He's like, that's the first thing we did, bro. And Javi drops his bullets. He's like, I got your bullets right here, bitch. And Vera goes over, and now Elliot's like really nervous. And now Vera's like, all right, dude, I gotta kill you now. I don't trust you. And then there's a great scene where Mr. Robot's like, he's like, that was my mistake. He's like, it was a lapse. He's like, don't punish him for my mistake. And Vera's like, man, he's like, you just tried to kill me for no damn reason. He's like, I can't trust you. And he's like, look, we made a mistake. Let's make up for it. And he's like, wait, man, why you always gotta be so thirsty? And he goes over and he loads the gun, and he walks in the other room, and he grabs Krista. So Vera comes in, he's got the gun back to Krista's head, and Elliot's like, you know what? He's like, as soon as we steal the money, he's like, I'll be a partner, I'll do everything. And Vera's like, you know, that's great and all, but he's like, I know for a fact that I can't trust you. So he's like, why would I do that? And Elliot's like, I made a mistake. He's like, you would have done the same thing. He's like, incorrecto, Elliot. He's like, I would have made sure to kill your ass. He's like I'm about to do to her. And then Elliot's like, stop, don't hurt her. And he's like, tell me why I shouldn't shoot her right now. And Elliot's like, she's a good person. And he's like, tell me why I shouldn't shoot her right now. And he's like, she doesn't deserve this. And he's like, that's not going to work, Elliot. And then Elliot's like, I need her. And the music crescendos once again. Oh, I get it now. He's like, she's your shaman. He's like, I've been looking at this shit the wrong way the whole time. And he's like, now I see. And it cuts into Krista's face. We go to Act 4. We're back in the other room here. And then Krista sits down in the chair. He unties Krista, and he's like, look, we're going to have a therapy session right now. He's like, Elliot, sit on the couch. And Krista's like, what is this going to accomplish, dude? She's like, this isn't going to accomplish anything. And Elliot's like, Vera's like, sit your ass down. And Elliot sits on the couch. And Elliot just goes, you know, he wants a show. Let's just give him a show. And he's like, that's right. I'm going to sit over here in the window. He's like, got my popcorn ready. And Krista's like, you sadistic son of a bitch. But she's like, you know, this only works in a controlled environment, right? She's like, me and him alone, that's it. And Vera says, okay. He's like, Peanuts, Javier, take a walk. And they're like, I'm not just going to leave you. And he's like, take a fucking walk. And so they leave. So it's just Vera, Krista, and Elliot. Elliot's like, okay, Krista, just listen to him. He's like, we'll get out of this. And he's like, my mother just died. He's like, how about we talk about that? And she's like, well, now that some time has passed, she's like, how does it make you feel? And he's like, no, I heard all this bullshit already. And Vera comes over, and he goes over to the secret file. He's like, ask him about Mr. Robot. And Elliot's like, okay, let's talk about that. And then he's like, ask him about the thing that he doesn't need to, he doesn't know or whatever. And Elliot's like, what are you talking about? And then Krista's like, no, we can't talk about that. And Mr. Robot shows up, and he's like, Krista, do not say anything. And Vera's like, hey, I'll read it for you. And Vera takes the folder, and he's like, patient is guarded, and this makes it very hard to work with him. And Mr. Robot's like, tell him to stop. And they're freaking out. And Krista's like, you can't read those as my confident files. Mr. Robot and Krista are both begging Vera to stop reading. And Vera's like, Elliot, you sure you don't want to hear what she wrote about you in here? Elliot's like, continue. And she's like, oh, you shouldn't be reading that. And Elliot's like, I said, keep reading. Now he's getting kind of mad. And he says like, oh, strained relationship with Mr. Robot. He's like, keeps us from getting to the root problem of what's really hurting Elliot. And he's getting mad now. And he starts asking Krista, like, what does that mean? And then they go through, he's like, let's talk about the window scene here. And she's like, Elliot, there's like a lot of hesitation. And Mr. Robot says like, he's just playing his mind games. Don't listen to him. And he's like, he tells Mr. Robot to shut the fuck up. And he's like, keep going. And he's like, Krista, what are they talking about? And she's like, Elliot, I don't want to do this. And he's like, Krista, I need you to tell me. So they have this very long sequence where it's really, really good. Acting across the board is phenomenal. Vera's like walking around, and he's like, there it is, that poison. He's like, pick that shit up. Krista tells him like, Elliot, that day at the window, he's like, why did you go up to your room? And he's like, Darlene and I were making Kevin McAllister the snowman, and then we went out to look for my camera. And she's like, okay. And she's like, do you remember this, or is this what Darlene told you? He's like, Darlene told me. And she's like, do you remember why you can't, why you don't remember this? Or do you know why you can't remember this? And he's like, no, I just can't remember it. And she's like, do you ever think Mr. Robot is hiding that memory from you to protect you? And he's like, protect me from what? And she says, like, so what happened then? And he's like, we heard my dad's footsteps. And he's like, I sent Darlene to the closet. And he's like, I grabbed a bat and I started swinging. And she's like, but why? She's like, were you afraid of your father? And he's like, no, why would I be afraid of him? He's my best friend. And then he's like, he was my only friend. And she's like, so why were you swinging the bat? He like stops for a second. And she's like, Elliot, were you afraid of your father? And he kind of hesitates. And she's like, Elliot, did your father ask you to do something that you didn't want to do? And then he says, like, yes. And it's incredible acting. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of recapping it, guys. But I mean, it's just edge of your seat acting and drama. It's insane. But eventually we get to the point where Krista says, like, Elliot, did your father sexually molest you? And there's a really long pause, and Elliot is like breaking down. And Mr. Robot, before she asks that, says, like, if you tell him this, it will destroy him. And he's like on his knee and he's like shaking his head. And Mr. Robot actually turns to Elliot and says, I can't protect you anymore. And it's crazy. But basically, we eventually get to the point where Elliot realizes that his father molested him, and he absolutely breaks down crying. It's so sad, dude. It's absolutely incredible acting from Rami. And he's on the couch crying. And again, the music is building, and it's like there's these long pauses between each question, and it's so good. Gloria Rubin, I think her name is. She absolutely kills it as Krista. Elliot's fantastic. Mr. Robot's fantastic. Elliot VR is fantastic. Man, the acting is so good in this scene. It's insane. But this is mostly between Krista and Elliot, and Rami and Gloria are just, man, they're so good. And Elliot's like, he also like slouches down as the questions go, and he's looking away, and he starts like these tears start going down his face, and he just absolutely breaks down. He starts like hysterically crying and just completely broken. It looks, the acting is just another level. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it's just crazy. But that's the end of Act 5. We go back to the other room they start in the same room. Elliot's on the couch. His hands are like on the side of his head. And Krista is like, Elliot, I'm sorry we had to go through that. And then Vera goes over, and Vera like really connects to them. And he says, like, man, you're going through that shit. He's like, I understand where you're coming from. Just know that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And he goes to touch him, and Elliot goes, don't touch me. He's like, don't fucking touch me. And then he goes in the other room, and Vera's like, Jesus, dude. And he walks over. But this was Vera's plan to break him down. And so Elliot goes over to the window, and he's like, I can't. He's like, you fucking did this to me. And he's like, no, man, I just made you see the truth. And Elliot's like, I can't live like this. He's like, I don't know what to do. I can't live like this. And he's like, that's because you're still hiding Vera's like, you're hiding all that anger and the sadness too. He's like, you need to let that shit out. And Elliot's like, I can't do this. And then he like turns to the window and he screams a couple times. And like the lightning goes through, and it's really, really powerful. And Vera's like, there it is. He's like, let that shit out. He's like, you take that pain. And he's like, strong ones build from it. And so Elliot is just, man, I can't even, like, the amount of anger and sadness and just pain and how broken he is just absolutely on display here. So Vera kind of grabs his shoulders, and Elliot's like shaking and looking at the ground, and Rami is just, I can't even believe his performance here. And so he goes over to the fireplace, and he's getting pissed at Vera, and he's like, you shouldn't have done this. He's like, you've broken me. And then he sits down, he tells him, like, no, like, you build that shit up. Like, that's, you take that poison. And he's like, once you weather the storm, he's like, you are the storm. He's like, you're special, Elliot. And he's like, no, everyone else needs to look out for cover. And Vera's crying too. And it's like, he, as evil and twisted and crazy as Vera has been, he feels that pain too. And he really is connecting with Elliot on that level there. And he looks into him. And then eventually he like stands up and he says, like, you can do this or whatever. He's like, I believe in you. And then what eventually happens is that he puts his hand on Elliot's shoulder, and then he breathes in, he exhales. There's like a sound effect. And then we slowly pan out, dude. And Krista took Isaac's knife and stabbed him right in the back. And Vera starts coughing up blood, and it's really like messed up. And Krista's just standing there like quiet, and Vera gets up and he just realizes what's happened, and he falls on the ground and he moves for a second, but all the lights slowly go out there, and then we get the end credits. And as Sam did for the suicide episode, he puts it at the end here: if you or someone you know needs help finding crisis resources, visit National Domestic Violence Hotline with the hotline and the number in the website there. So really, really smart move there. But that is how the episode wraps. Okay, guys, for a white rose for this one, I couldn't just pick one. I mean, the acting throughout this whole episode, I think this is probably the best acting in the entire series, honestly. And I feel like I did a really crappy job of recapping this one. And I'm sorry, there was so much going on. I tried to just go off of memory, but it's just tough because there's so many great lines of dialogue. There's not a single line of dialogue wasted, and it's so intense. And there's really these questions that are raised and asked, and it's phenomenal. But the white rose, everyone is so good, but the white rose in this episode, I got to give a dual white rose because I couldn't just give it to one. It's Rami as Elliot, and it's Elliot VR as Vera. Their scenes are some of the most impactful in the entire series. Their acting is just on a whole nother level. And that's not to say that Mr. Robot isn't great, because he is excellent as well. When he's begging Krista to say this will break Elliot and don't do this, and when he's talking back to Vera, he's not standing down from Vera, he's like the muscle. It's just crazy. But the scenes that are most impactful, I think, not only does Rami just absolutely go on a whole different level of acting when he's crying, when he's talking to Krista, when Mr. Robot's telling him like he's trying to hide the memory, and he's like Elliot, they're just trying to fuck with you, and Elliot's like, shut the fuck up. He's like, I need to hear the truth. And he's like, just tell me. And then when he breaks down crying, you really feel that he's like absolutely broken. And it's so sad, dude. I was bawling my eyes out watching this episode. It's so sad that obviously Elliot is like a victim of sexual abuse by his own father. But it's like Mr. Robot is like this character that we've grown to love. And he's supposed to be Elliot's dad, and it's like this version of Mr. Robot is the protector, and he's been great, and we would never even think that he would sexually molest Elliot. So the fact that version differs from his real father, where we found out his real father was just an asshole and just a piece of shit and sexually assaulted him, it's like, wow. But Mr. Robot kept that from him to protect him, but he was hiding from the truth. So it's crazy, but Vera rips that Band-Aid off. But the scenes where Elliot and Vera are like talking to each other and going head to head, and they're acting, especially when Elliot goes over and like screams at the window, and Vera's like, that's the shit right there. He's like, weather the storm. And they really connect. And Vera is very much the antagonist in this episode, but his acting is so good. Like Elliot VR, it's crazy because they really challenge each other to be better. And like Elliot VR won my white rose last week because he was just insane. He's on another level this episode, and Rami, I don't want to say he matches him, but he comes pretty close, and he goes to his own new level. So I think this is the best acting of the entire series. And this one's a little bit longer. It's 56 minutes of just intense action. The score, the music, everything is crazy. But if I had to pick two, I couldn't just pick one. So I'm going to pick Elliot VR as Vera, and what is his final episode as we see him die at the end here, and Rami Malek as always as Elliot Alderson. So those are my two white roses for this episode. Okay, guys, if you haven't guessed it already, it's a 10 out of 10 for the score. This is an absolute masterclass of storytelling. This is 56 minutes of perfect television, and it's so different than the other Mr. Robot episodes. We still get the aerial shots, and we still get the side where they're off-center camera angles, but the way that this episode is shot, where it's set up like the different acts, the 5 acts, and it really does feel like a play where it's like the music is so perfect. It's where it comes in and it's like slowly zooming out, slowly zooming in, and like Vera when he's talking about his plan, and it's like this big moment, and it's like the music is going, and Mr. Robot usually like is quiet in those moments, but I think they nailed it here where they were playing different pieces of a play or different acts where it's like everything was way more dramatic based on the music. And like it's just crazy the way they come in and out, and like when the thunder went off every time and it's like Elliot, Mr. Robot switching it. It's just phenomenal. The lighting looks excellent. This takes place in Chris's apartment the whole time. We don't go anywhere else in this whole episode. We go between those two rooms, and it is so riveting. It's so intense, and it's so emotional and powerful. And I can't believe it. I feel like this is probably one of my personal worst reviews, where I feel like I just had a hard time reviewing this one because there's so much content. There's 56 minutes of just like every line of dialogue was handcrafted and masterfully done in this episode. And I really wish I could read it verbatim back. I think the early episodes I used to write down notes like that, but I don't have the energy in me for that anymore, guys. So, but please, like, don't let my what I think personally is probably a poor review unintentionally. Please don't let that spoil it. Please go watch episode 7, season 4. It will blow you away. It is absolutely, I think, the best episode of Mr. Robot. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's another episode of Hello Friends. Again, I apologize. I don't feel like my review matched up to the level of episode it was. So despite my kind of subpar reviewing today, please go watch that episode. It is chef's kiss to the finest extent. So yeah, thanks for checking out the content, guys. We only have 6 more to go now, so we're getting towards the end. So hopefully I'll be in a tip-top form for next week. But yeah, it's just crazy. Now we're going to see what happens after Varys' death, and obviously his bodyguards once they find out and all that. And just crazy. And for Krista to come back and kill Varys is nuts. So especially more we to see now how Elliot deals with the truth that has been kept from him for so long, that he was sexually molested, and Mr. Robot was hiding that from him and stowing that memory away. And it's like, now that Elliot knows and he's broken and he's sad, how does that affect the plan? They still are looking to hack the Deus group. And so we'll see how that goes forward. But yeah, we're coming down to the end here, guys. Thanks for checking out Project Potter. Thanks for checking out Hello Friends, the Mr. Robot review show. Please go watch Mr. Robot, dude. I hope you're not watching this as the first one, because spoilers for the, near the end of season 4. But just my favorite show of all time, and that's only heightening after this review, after this series, really. So like, comment, subscribe, guys. Go check out the other content on the channel. I do appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. Ring that bell notification. And until next time, guys, goodbye, friend.